Can we have Jack, who has always helped us, MARUAH and other groups, with a good legal analysis of what is at stake. And again here, he's going to do some reflections on the legality of the election. And I hope that Sudhir will come back soon to this corner, right? Yes, thank you. Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to say something that's slightly different from discussion of politics, because my area is really about looking at the legal and procedural aspects. Can you hear me now?
It's not close enough. I think we hold it.
Okay, is that better? Okay, so I'm just going to talk about three issues. I'm going to look at, we're going to look at the situation before the election. Are you looking at the slides? Yeah, okay. Before the election, I'm going to look at the position of the Elections Department, the redrawing of electoral boundaries. I'm going to then talk about what happens during the campaign period and look specifically at election advertising on polling off day and polling day and films, and then the issue of NCMPs that has come up. Okay, so before the writ of election, this has already been mentioned by Nizam and by someone else, I think. Was it Derek? The Elections Department is the department of the Prime Minister's office. There don't seem to be a lot of complaints about how the ELD actually carries out the election. I mean, I don't see sort of opposition parties after the election saying there was fraud or anything. So it seems that most people accept that the process itself it runs smoothly. But I think that from a point of impartiality, it really, really would be better if we had an independent commission. But again, this is one of those direct things where I don't think it's going to change anything. But I'll just throw it out there. Okay, second thing is the Electoral Boundaries Review Committee's recommendations always raises criticisms about, look, you know, it's gerrymandering, it's not fair, and so on, and nothing changes about this. Next please. Yeah. So, I mean, this is just, this is the map that was annexed to the report, in case you haven't seen it. It's too small, right? Okay. So I'm actually, number one, I'm not very convinced by the very, very common argument that you hear that, wow, the constituency I live bears no relation to the actual geographical area in which I'm actually residing. To me, this is a red herring, because the constituency is such a large area that there is no way you're going to find a geographical name that will correctly represent all the different wards and districts that it covers. So if you wanted to really do something about this, you could say we are not going to use geographical names. From now on, East Coast GRC will be called Harmony GRC. Bishop Toa Payoh will now be called Prosperity GRC. Right? And this will eliminate the issue entirely. But what is the real issue are the electoral boundaries, of course, being redrawn in a way that benefits the incumbent? That is the real question. So I think we should really get away from this idea that, wow, you know, the constituency I live, the name doesn't match where I live. That to me is not a real argument. And the interesting thing, of course, is that the EPRC report is very, very scanty on details. It's essentially saying, this is how it is. And they don't really say how. They really only, one statement that says anything is that we have decided that we will have 20,000 to 37,000 electors per MP, with a plus or minus 30% variance, which is very high. But this is past practice. They've been doing this for many, many elections. So basically, this is the methodology, and that's all you know. Then the rest of the report, which is actually very short, it's just, and this is the result we come up with, and they just list the number of voters in every state without really saying like how they decided this issue. So I think, next slide please. I think the real question is, should the EPRC, and again this has been alluded to, issue a draft report and provide an opportunity for people who really want to object to it and submit representations. This is not done, right? It's a foregone conclusion. Here is our result, and the government said we are now accepted. And in fact, if you look at the report of the EPRC, the first line is that the government has already accepted the report. So it's not about discussion. No? The government has already accepted the report. This is the report, and this is how. You know? And if you compare to a country that's not very far from us, under the Malaysian constitution, now none of this in Singapore is in the constitution. In their constitution in Malaysia, proposed boundary changes have to be published in the government gazette, and at least one newspaper in any constituency that's affected. And people are actually given a month to look at the draft draft report of the Boundaries Commission, and to make representations. And then after that, hear everyone. Then they make a final decision on the matter. So should we have a process of that sort? And if so, should it really be conducted by an independent electoral commission? Arguably, yeah, I suppose it should be, right? So something to think about. Okay, so I'm now going to talk about what happens during the campaign period. Just really going to focus on two very small points. Firstly, there is a legal definition of what campaign period is. It's from the close of nomination, so you find out who are the candidates and whether there's going to be a poll, to the start of cooling off day. So it doesn't include cooling off day and polling day itself. It's the period in between. Political parties are required to notify the returning officer within 12 hours after the campaign period starts of every internet election advertising platform that they're going to use. They're supposed to give the website address, the Twitter account handle, the Facebook account name, and everything. They have to make this long declaration. But in addition to that, they even have to inform or make a declaration of every single type of election advertising that they publish during the course of election. Now, I don't know how useful this process is or why we even have this. It must be quite a burden on political parties to... Basically, I'm going to post something on Facebook, I've got to send a declaration form, 5-page form you can download from the election department's website, just to post something on the internet. So I'm not very sure why this is not needed. Is it too cumbersome? But what is even more interesting is there seems to be still confusion over what people can or cannot say on cooling off day and polling day. And this is not helped by the advice that was given by ELD, which I think was actually slightly confusing. They said the transmission of personal political views by individuals to other individuals on a non-commercial basis using the internet blah, blah, blah is allowed. So this says, wow, great, I can post anything I like on Facebook or Twitter so long as it's personal and not commercial. But actually what the law says is the telephonic or electronic transmission by an individual to another individual of the first mentioned individual's views is allowed. That's very different from what the electoral department said. Elections department said, because actually what the law seems to say is, I can send an email to my friend that says you should vote for PAP, but I cannot post. On this next slide, please. Arguably, a Facebook post saying the same thing, because that's not an individual to an individual anymore. But of course, we don't see a lot of prosecutions for that. I don't think anyone's ever been prosecuted for this. The only time when this is a problem is when it's a candidate that accidentally posts something at 12:01, a glitch. Yes, I didn't know it ever happened, but apparently it does. And I think that this needs to be clarified. Is it actually too rigid and impossible to enforce? Anyway, maybe we should do away with the restriction, at least for voters who are not candidates or people working for candidates. But if this restriction is removed, does this even actually really defeat the purpose of having a break from campaigning or cooling off day and polling day? Okay, then I'm going to say something about party political films. Very complicated definition in the Act, which I'm not going to go through. Essentially, you are not allowed to you're not supposed to exhibit or publish in party political films in court, full stop. But some things are not party political films. And essentially, a film is not a party political film if it's purely factual and does not contain any dramatic elements. So if you do a documentary history of the SDP or something like that, or you decide to show a video of a rally, okay, so you've just basically had a camera film the whole rally and show that that's not a party political film. Does this restrict creativity? Well, yeah, it kind of restricts the ways in which parties can campaign, I suppose. Or would you consider this to be good because it is a way to prevent negative campaigning, such as SDP's peppy washing powder satire? Okay, clearly dramatic, not factual in nature, so fell afoul of this and got wrapped on the knuckles by MDA, the Media Development Authority, who is in charge of enforcing the Films Act. Okay. And finally, just to talk about something that's happened after the election, the NCMP scheme. Okay, so under the NCMP scheme, you know that the best losers in the election get to pick NCMPs. And the maximum number of NCMPs you get is 9 less the number of opposition candidates elected. Since there were 6 opposition candidates elected at this election, you get up to 3 NCMPs. And of course, the NCMPs, who gets to be an NCMP is decided by the vote share that you get. Next slide, please. According to the following rules. So it's in priority of how much you get, right? The person who is the best loser is first priority, and then so on and so forth. But you have to have at least 15% of the votes in the constituency. And there is this rule that you cannot have more than 1 candidate from an SMC and not more than 2 candidates from each GRC. So let's say there was a 3-way fight in an SMC, and it so happened that the 2 losing parties were the number one, number two. Sorry, the number two person is skipped over and they have to look for someone else beyond that because there's a rule that you only have one candidate from an SMC. Similarly for GRC. We didn't really have that problem in this election because we didn't have that situation arise. So in this election, all the qualifying candidates are from the WP. But of course we know that Lilian has said she does not want to be an NCMP. She's not going to take up the seat. Next slide, please. And she was actually the best performing unsuccessful candidate. So there is still some doubt about whether WP can actually nominate someone to replace her. And this is because the Act, the Parliamentary Elections Act says that if an NCMP fails to take the MP's oath of allegiance at the first or second sitting of Parliament after the general election, Parliament can declare that the seat has become vacant and that it be filled by the next succeeding candidate. So the question is, what does "and" here mean? Next slide, please. So Jacqueline Neo, who teaches law at NUS, a friend of mine, has pointed out in a blog post that this could mean that if Parliament declares the seat to be vacant, it must then go on and allow the seat to be filled by the next qualifying candidate. But it would appear that the Attorney General takes a different view. So the Attorney General apparently gave advice to the Elections Department, which then issued a statement saying, the Attorney General advised that Parliament has a choice to declare the seat vacant and not to fill it. I don't think that the PAP would do that. There's no benefit whatsoever to them to be difficult about this issue and to say, no, we're only going to have two NCMPs, too bad, you know? So I think that if they did decide to declare the seat vacant, they would probably let the next person come in, which would apparently from WP be Daniel Goh. But I think it's interesting, it's an issue that has not been clarified yet. Will WP bring the issue to court if the PAP actually says we're not going to fill the seat? And the interesting thing is, if they decide that they aren't going to declare the seat vacant, then what is the situation there? It's also not clear, because it would appear that there's nothing in the law which says that Lilian cannot change her mind after 2 years and say, I now decided I want to come back and take the oath. Because there's nothing that prevents her from doing that, and they've not declared the seat to be vacant. So you've got a very strange situation. For 2 years later, she comes back and says, I now want to take my oath, and I'm going to take up the NCMP seat. So again, it'd be interesting to perhaps this should be clarified. Or maybe, according to what the opposition has been calling for, should the scheme as a whole be scrapped? And I don't know about this, because I think that despite the limitations on what NCMPs are allowed to vote for in Parliament, it does give opposition politicians exposure. You get a public platform to show your face, let people get to know you, and that does help. And I think we know a lot of the candidates who were NCMPs much better than those who basically didn't have that opportunity, and then we kind of saw them a week before nomination day, which is so it's not something to be lightly discarded, I think. Okay, thanks very much.